Welcome, I'm Coach Woodbray, and this is My House Throws. Welcome, My House Throwers. This is Coach Woodbray, and this video is about understanding the discus and the different aspects to having successful throws with it. I want you to imagine that this discus is cut in half and is divided as like a clock. You have 12 o'clock of where you're going to be throwing it out into the sector, and 3 o'clock ought to be where your index finger is so that you can drive through the discus. The back half of the discus I like to call the grip or the hold side. The front half I call the momentum side, which I'll explain here in a little bit. 3 o'clock is the farthest point that you can get from the center of the discus. Now when I say the farthest point, I mean that if I was to draw lines infinitely long, one at the center of the discus, one on the outside of the discus, the furthest I can get from the middle all the way to the edge. If I go towards 12 o'clock, you'll notice that the edge of the discus gets closer to the center. So that's what I mean by the farthest point. You're going to want your thumb at 12 o'clock and your index finger at 3 o'clock. Now when you put your hand over the edge of the discus edge is going to fit into the last digit of your hand. So I'm going to put my hand like this. Now you'll notice about this hand, the middle finger is the finger that is at the farthest point. This is going to cause some problems for when we throw. When I bend my last digits over the edge of the discus, that middle finger is going to be so far extended that I'm going to want to readjust my hand. Now it makes so that my index finger no longer is on the edge and it will cause me to throw from my middle finger. A lot of young throwers do this, not realizing it's just because of your hand placement. So what we'd like to do is to make sure that the index finger is over the farthest point of that discus. And as we line up our hand there, you'll notice it looks like the middle finger is extended way over. But when we bend our fingers to get the edge of the discus, it'll actually be in a very nice place. Now, some discus throwers like to have their fingers far apart from one another. But to get more leverage, I would highly encourage that you put them a little bit closer so that we have that power that's needed to throw it out into momentum. But you're going to have to find whatever position fits best for you. Here's two examples of holds that are going to be powerful positions because your index finger is at the furthest point. You go ahead and once again you decide. The placement for the grip on the discus is going to play a major part in being able to launch that discus out into the sector. Sometimes to help my athletes recognize the importance of the hand placement on the discus, I have them throw cones out into the sector. Some people use bowling pins. The reason for that is because we're trying to show the athlete that we want the greatest amount of weight on the outside or far from where the hand is as possible. For example, I like to call this the axe, cone, or bowling pin effect. My daughter likes to throw axes, and so let's pretend that we're going to be throwing an axe. Now a discus for a right-handed thrower is going to be going clockwise. If I put a handle here and I go throw that axe, because of the weight of the head, as I throw that handle, it's going to be able to pick up speed and momentum and power so it can stick into the wood. The same thing is with the discus. We want to make sure that we get this big effect. By getting behind the discus, you're going to be able to have that rim weight whip the discus around for more spin, more speed, and more power. That's why you want to have your hand in the back half with a combination of your flick and your drive with your shoulder through your arm. It's going to make a huge difference on how far that throw goes. One thing that you'll notice with the discus is the release angles that there are. In this picture you'll see that as I'm holding this discus, if I put a straight plane, my discus is not straight. There's going to be a little tilt in there. So when I throw, if this is an angle looking right from the sector to where I'm throwing, at the height I'm going to be throwing it, you will not see that it's going to be flat. Your fingers are going to be slanted down a bit as you start to throw, and you're going to make that discus have a 10 to 15 degree tilt to it. And this is normal, and this is actually good for the flight as it takes off into the sector. And so don't be thinking that discus has to be flat. It needs to be at about a 10, 15 degree tilt to it. Now, discus flight. There's two different things you need to understand about discus flight. There is the release angle, which is the path of the center of the discus and how it takes off immediately after the release. We want that angle to be through the center at 35 to 38 degrees, depending on each athlete and your power that you have. Now, this is also to be compared to what is called an inclination angle. That's the long axis of the discus angle after the immediate release. You'll notice that this discus is not facing the exact same as that arrow that I have here. The discus will be about 25 to 27%. As it flies through the air, it ought to look like this. Now, the reason that you don't throw it the exact same as your release angle is as it flies through the air, it's going to be able to use the air, the drag, and other things to be able to have an optimal distance. And so don't have it exactly flat, or don't throw through it like you would a javelin. To see what the release ought to look like, I'm going to use a good friend of mine and his example of his release, Jared Rome. Did very well throughout his career as a discus thrower. And you'll notice some things that he does really well here. One, he's looking away from the throw. He's not stopping his throw in order to watch it. You want to make sure that you finish your throw, and so looking away will help with that. He also keeps his arm at a 90-degree angle to his torso. He keeps that arm up so that he's got that good leverage that we're looking for, because we want to keep that discus as far from our body as possible. And so we're going to keep it at a 90-degree angle, pretend it's poisonous, and keep it as far from us. And he does really well at that. So he keeps his chest and his arm right in line. Another great example of a finished thrower is one of the greatest in the world. It's Robert Harding. You'll notice in this picture here his follow through after he's completed, or once he's released that discus. He's doing a couple things here. One, he's driven all the way through the discus. He didn't pull back that throwing arm or the delivery arm. He followed all the way through. He extended. He had a really strong flick, which then launches it out into the sector. And the other thing that he did was it's about a 38 degrees into that sector. And so we want to make sure that when we're finishing, we finish strong. We can't break down our technique right there at the very end because you want to watch it, or you're hesitant and you start to pull back. We want to finish it. Now that you understand more about the discus and how it flies and the different mechanics to throwing it, you'll be able to understand the different drills in the next video of why you're doing them, and you'll want to perfect them until you have made a wonderful house.